Creating a hybrid training program can be difficult because there's a lot of variables going on. And we simplified that in the last video. And in this video, I want to show you how to adjust and progress that hybrid training program, because much like creating it to begin with, this can be a difficult part in the program design process. Now, if you don't want to follow a hybrid program, if you clicked on this for the adjusting your program aspect and you are not following a hybrid program, that's okay too, because the parameters I'm going to be adjusting as the weeks progress in this program are going to be applicable to anybody in the gym lifting for body composition changes, general strength, endurance, whatever it may be. I am specifically using a hybrid program to adjust from in this video though. So when we look at this, we have to understand, what do we want to progress? So we're going to go over what we will be progressing week to week. Are we progressing the reps, the sets, the weight, the exercises? How are we adjusting those? How often are we adjusting those? And how fast do we adjust those? What do we need to wait for in order to actually progress the program? How do we earn that progression? And then we have to carry that same thought process over to the running aspect. How much should we be progressing our conditioning? How much should we progress the running versus something like a bike or a sled? How often does this adjustment happen? So on and so forth. And so by the end of this video, my hopes are that you understand how to look at your program, whether you wrote your program or somebody else wrote it for you, and you know exactly how it should be progressing week to week to make sure that you are progressing in the gym or your trainer is doing their job the right way. So we have a general outline of this program, again, from the last video. So if you didn't watch that, go back and watch that. We'll link it in the description here. We have our split. The split is going to be an upper-lower split. That's 4 times a week, meaning we have one upper day, one lower day, another upper day, and another lower day. We're going to spread these out throughout the week. We are going to run 3 times a week. Now, you don't have to run 3 times a week in order for this to be a hybrid program. You can be on a hybrid program and run twice a week. You could be on a hybrid program and run 4 or 5 times a week. You could be on a hybrid program and not run at all because maybe you hate running and you'd rather ride a bike or go swimming or pull the sled or just do conditioning in general. A hybrid training program is a training program that is prioritizing multiple avenues of performance and progression in a single split, which means that we are trying to accomplish some form of aerobic conditioning and or endurance. We are trying to accomplish some form of power and or strength development. And we are trying to, at the least, maintain a good physique, if not progress a good physique by either losing fat or building muscle. So we have our 4 days a week of lifting. We have our 3 days of running. This run split is going to be an easy run, a tempo run, and a long run. As described in the last video, this means that we're going to have an easy run where we're not going, as you can imagine, too hard. We are actually using it as a day to really just kind of grease the groove, grease the gears. And this is a way of saying like the skill of running. We are also not pushing the threshold. We're going to do way less miles than we can max out at. It is meant to be a recovery style run. Then we have a tempo run. The tempo run is going to be more geared towards intervals. So we might have a warm up like a mile. Then we go into actually, this was my exact run this morning, going into a running interval of 10 rounds of a 0.125 mile. So even less than a quarter mile, 1/8 of a mile. And so it's a hard run. And then I jog at an active recovery pace for 1/8 of a mile. And I repeat that 10 times, and then I do a mile cool down. That's a tempo run. A tempo run can also be a ladder. This might mean we warm up and then we go from a mile to 3/4 of a mile to a half mile, and then we do a couple quarter mile repeats, and then we go back up. So anything where we're changing the tempo and the pace to allow our body to push the threshold close to a sprint, but not quite there. So a really hard run and then an easy run, a hard run and an easy run. And we're just cycling those throughout the whole tempo run. And then the last one is a long run. A long run is going to be relative to the person. So whether a long run is 3 miles for you or it's 13 miles, doesn't really matter. We have one long run a week where we're really just trying to have a sustainable pace and push the distance that we can create. And that would be our 3 different runs throughout the week. With our upper lower split, ideally these workouts are either on separate days or the same day, 4 to 6 hours apart, to be a practicing science-based concurrent training methods and just make sure recovery and results are optimized. Now, each session has an activate. So you see these 1, 2, 3, 4. We have an activate / primer phase. This is where we're warming up the joints, activating the muscles, getting the nervous system fired up by being explosive. Then we have a compound lift, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. Then we have our accessory exercise. And this is a big key that we've done really well. And I've practiced this, and not many people realize the importance of this in their program design, but making sure that whatever my accessory exercise is for that day, it is going to support the compound of the other day, which means if I have a bench press today, I'm probably doing a dumbbell military press, a landmine press, some kind of overhead press accessory exercise, because on the next upper body day, I am doing an overhead press as my compound lift. So on my lower body days, I will have a squat for compound and then a deadlift accessory. And then on the next day, a deadlift compound and a squat accessory. This is really, really important for making sure you don't have any overuse injuries since you are training in a hybrid style program. And then after the accessory exercise, we are going to finish with isolation. So this is get a pump. Whether you're a female and you want to get a booty pump, or you're a guy and you want to get a bicep pump, this is where we throw in high reps bodybuilding programming just to try and build some muscle. So this is happening every single session, right? And so we have this overview of what a good split and training program looks for the hybrid athlete or trainee. Now, the question ultimately is, how do we actually progress this training week to week? So there's going to be a couple ways that we can go about this. The main way we are going to progress all of this training, and I recommend most trainees train for progression, whether you are a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, is going to be a double progression method. And the reason for this is because a double progression method allows us to optimize volume for muscle growth while minimizing the reliance on load. And so what I mean by that is you don't have to add 5 pounds to the bar every single week. Most people only prioritize a load progression in a linear fashion. What this means is you have 10 reps, and this week you did 100. Now I want to do 105. And then the week after I want to do 105. Most people can't do that. Otherwise, I'd be benching 600 pounds by now. So what they do is a linear strength progression, which means that I will drop my volume while increasing my intensity. Intensity being load. That means I'm going from 10 to 8 to 6 to 4 week after week after week, and that's reps. What that allows me to do is pretty much guarantee that I can lift heavier each week. So now that 100, 105, 110, 115, that is a very likely progression to accomplish because I'm doing 2 less reps. I better be able to add some kind of load to there. And then after 4 or 5 weeks, I can cycle back to the beginning and start with that 10 reps. And hopefully this time, instead of 100 pounds, I'm doing 105 pounds. This works great for compound lifts. And it's not that I don't suggest it. And I think most people can do that on compounds, but the rest of our exercises we cannot do. And if we're training in a hybrid training program where we want to perform better and look better, we want to guarantee that we progress total volume. Because we have 2 main kinds of volume that we're looking at here. Load volume, and then we have actual set volume. So how many sets did we do, or how many reps within that set did we do? Now, a double progression method would look like this. If we have 3 sets of 8 to 10, what we know is that we have to start with that 8 rep and maximize the load we can lift there. So let's say we're doing 3 sets of 8 with 100 pounds. Well, I have the whole block. So let's say it's 3, 4, up to 6 weeks long to accomplish that same exact 100 pounds with 10 reps now. 3 times 10 times 100, which is the total volume load, is greater than 3 times 8 times 100 by a lot. And this is what's really important. And this is the best way to slowly progress. And if you're tracking this volume load in this way, you're going to realize the progressions you're making far greater. And I've seen this work really successfully with a lot of clients because it shows us that just that extra rep can be a lot. So looking at this, first define volume load. That is going to be sets times reps times load. 3 times 10 times 100 is 3,000 pounds. That is your total tonnage, your total volume load that you are lifting. A lot of people don't track this. Inside of our app, the Tailored Trainer, we actually literally show you the total volume load, the total tonnage on every single exercise you do. So that way, if you're stuck on a bench press and it's like adding 5 pounds would be extremely difficult, but you can add a single rep, you can see how much that would do, because 5 times 1 times 5 sets is actually a solid amount of weight. right? That's 25 extra pounds of volume load that you did versus just seeing 3 times 9 at the same weight. And if you're only looking at the load being 100 pounds on the bar, man, that is frustrating. Week after week after week at the same load because you can't get past that. Add a rep. You're adding more volume than you realize. So what we're doing here is we're looking at total volume load. And that tonnage is the total volume load is what we're after. And we're using a double progression method, which means every single set that you do is going to have a rep range. So when we do this, we want to make sure our rep ranges are between 2 and 3 reps. And what that means is 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 15. You can even stretch that to 5 rep range if you want to do a 10 to 15 rep set on a accessory or isolation exercise. But what this does is allows us to guarantee we're going to move up, okay? So first principle with progression for this video and for the sake of this hybrid style of training, we're going to focus on a double progression method for all of our exercises, which means you should be listing out your program in a way that each exercise has 3 or 4 sets and a range that you're sticking to. The compound range, and this is in, I'll list this out actually, this is perfect. The compound lifts should be in a lower rep range. So let's say anywhere between 4 to 8. You're probably not going to want to go over that. This is for compounds. The accessory exercises, we're looking at anywhere between 8 to 12. And then the isolation exercises, we're looking at anything between 10 to 25, which is a really big range. But you got to realize too that sometimes doing 25 reps on a leg extension or 25 reps on a cable face pull is very advantageous. Doesn't mean all of your sets are that way, but what we have is this accumulative volume or cumulative rep range that increases as the workout goes on, but also as the exercises get less fatiguing, less demanding of the nervous system. It doesn't take as much skill, right? You don't have to think too hard about doing a face pull or a curl compared to doing a back squat, and the injury risk drops as the session goes on. So these compound lifts have a lower rep range, focus on strength, and we build those up as the session goes on. But each of them have a range that we're sitting in because that's how we focus on this double progression method, where we are trying to accomplish the higher end of that rep range with the same load we had on the lower end in the beginning. So again, just to make this really clear, we have this 10 reps right here at the end of the block. That is our goal, to hit 10 reps with the same load that we hit 8 reps for at the beginning of the block, right? And if you can push way past that because you realize you're training like a wuss and you could probably add more weight and push it, which happens all the time, there's nothing wrong with it, go up and weight. So maybe it does start at 100 pounds and then you finish at 3 sets of 10 with 150 pounds because you just didn't know how to estimate your weight. That's totally fine. And that happens a lot in the beginning stages of training with a serious program. So we have this double progression method for our lifting, and that's the main progression scheme and method and system or strategy we're going to follow. What about running? So for running, it's really simple, actually. We have a general rule of thumb, and the general rule of thumb is 5 to 10% per week. We don't want to go above 10%. So 5 to 10% increase per With that, the reason is for overuse injuries. I recently ran a half marathon and I had to increase by a little bit over. I think it was like 15% increases per week to get ready because I didn't have much time. And I got runner's knee. My feet were killing me. I had blisters on my feet by the end of it. I did great. My lungs were fine. My aerobic system was fine, but my joints didn't love it. I have had multiple surgeries on my left side, so it was something I was nervous about anyway. Some people can probably get away with it, but the safest bet is just to stay less than 10% per week, 10% at most. So really, really simple. If you are going to run 2.5 miles and then you want to progress that by 10%, that is 0.25 miles added on the next week. So now you have a 2.75. And then the next progression would be 10% of that. There's also periods of time where it might be 10% in the beginning and 5% towards the end of your 12-week hybrid journey, let's say. And just like training progressions, there's no perfect way to do this. You have to learn and adapt the process, which is why we try to teach our clients and we try to have this all written out really clearly in the app that we use for our training, Tailored Trainer, because if the person doesn't know how to adapt for themselves, it's very difficult for the coach to maximize their results, because what's written on the paper isn't always the end all be all. So we know that we have to be within that 5 to 10%, but that doesn't mean that we can't ever push beyond 10% or that we can't ever just stay where we're at. Maybe we're not progressing 5 or 10% this week. Maybe we're just maintaining for a couple weeks because it's deload or because we're feeling the wear and tear on our body, or we're running a lot and we don't feel like spending more time running. We're just maintaining. So you got to learn how to adapt to this and be flexible, but take everything inside of your easy run, your tempo run, and your long run, and you would progress that by 10% per week. My advice for somebody who is not looking to progress for a timeline, so if you don't have a deadline for this, do this for one of your runs per week. So 1 per week. And the reason for this is instead of me adding 10% or even 5% volume to my long run and my tempo run and my easy run, I'm just going to add 10% or 5% to my long run this week, and then my tempo run the next week, and then my easy run the next week. And I'll rotate through those. In my experience and in my opinion, based on just load progression, especially the fact that we have this training program that we're lifting with in the gym and progressing, it's smarter to pick 1 per week and rotate through which one you progress, staying within that 5 to 10%. Now, the last thing to cover is the exercise selection. When is it appropriate to change your exercise? So I'm going to make a shameless plug for this one, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of advice because we have a whole video where I break down exactly how to know when to change an exercise. It is an in-depth video, 15, 20 minutes, where I take you through a presentation on how do you know when to adjust an exercise. And there's some key things to look out for. Is an exercise causing more joint fatigue than muscular fatigue? Is a certain exercise not giving you a good mind-muscle connection? Like you're doing tricep pushdowns, but all you feel is your traps, right? That's not a good exercise. So there's certain things that you want to look out for, as well as like injury risk being too high, or you just can't even progress it. You're stuck with it. But in general, outside of watching that video and picking apart the scoring system that I've created for this, the best thing to know with exercise selection is that each exercise should realistically, stick with you for at least 3 weeks. And I would say no more than 12 weeks. 12 weeks is on the longer scale. This is for somebody who's brand new to lifting. You're going to have weeks and weeks and weeks of progress you can make. So you don't want to change exercises too quickly, because if you swap them out too quickly, you change an exercise before you can progress it. Know that there's really this learning curve that takes place. Week 1, we actually are getting used to the movement. Week 2, we're confident in the movement and can actually push the intensity. Week 3, we might be finally to a place where we can add load to that or increase the reps with the given load. For some people, that's understanding how the load should be before they start going with that double progression method I talked about. Week 3 is finally when they're like, I feel comfortable with this exercise now. I've kind of mastered it. I feel like I can push the weight. Then from there, we got to spend a couple weeks progressing that load, right? So the newer you are in training, the less often you should change exercises, or the newer an exercise is for you, the longer you should keep it, because you need to practice it. The more advanced you get, and the more, I would say, your like catalog or repertoire of exercises are, because you get more skilled at training, the more often you can swap exercises, because you can instantly take an exercise and max out the weight because you've done it 100 times, right? My experience shows me that 3 to 12 weeks is the best. Beginners, closer to 12 weeks. At more advanced people, closer to 3 weeks. I would also say you can be interchanging these. So I might keep a compound lift for 10 weeks straight, but change my accessory and isolation exercise every 3 weeks, right? And I'm really just looking for the best exercise for my body, my muscles, my mind-muscle connection, and the skills required to perform those and push me closer to my goal. So when we really zoom out of this, we have, each exercise we're going to keep for 3 to 12 weeks, depending on the exercise, which means that you're not going to have a program necessarily that's 4 weeks long, and then the next 4 weeks, it's completely different from start to finish. A lot of times with my clients, the best thing for them is for me to look at it and go, how are they progressing? What is most important for them to continue progressing, and what doesn't really matter much? Okay, let's change the curl variation because we can do a million different ones and just have fun with it. Let's keep this lunge variation because I'm really trying to work on that with them. Keep the press variation because we're progressing that well, and then we'll change out some of these ones that they're not really feeling, right? And so it's going to be interchangeable throughout it. You're following this double progression method for all of your exercises. Even the compound lifts, so let's say it's a 4 to 6 or 6 to 8 rep range on those, it's lower, so you're still building strength, But again, we're following this double progression method where we're trying to accumulate volume throughout the training block. We're on an upper lower split 4 times a week with 3 days of running, and we're progressing our running by 5 to 10%, ideally choosing just one of those runs, either the easy, the tempo, or the long run, to progress rather than progressing all of them across the board every single week. When we do this, we're gonna have a solid program that we can follow realistically for months on end because the variables change at the right times. We can take a deload every 6 to 8 weeks if we're feeling overly fatigued, and rinse and repeat. And if you do this, you will build a hybrid physique. You will improve your strength, you will improve your endurance, and you will look like the athlete you were trying to look like.